Okay. Is he here?
Federal legislators, city senators,
This is congressional, so this is federal. These are federal questions. This representatives or federal questions. So this would be a question that we would ask our congressional.
The green light's on?
Do you want me to test it?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, don't scream at me anymore.
I'm going to be screaming a little more tonight. I haven't been screaming enough. Let you guys take all the screaming space. Are you?
Oh, man. Okay.
How much time is our opening?
2 minutes. It was 3.
It's different. It is different. Everything's fine. It's 2 minutes.
2 is not fine.
There a limit to questions for this group since we're
Oh, thank you. And you're sure it's a 2-minute opening and not a 3-minute? Okay, I'd be happy. Then, I was in that person.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. We have a nice audience here tonight. My name is Jane Wanderer. I'm the current president of the League of Women Voters of Butte County. This is one of our candidate forums. We're having 3 this year. A little bit about the League of Women Voters. I always start out with that. We're an organization that's been in existence since 1920 and actually before. 1920 we got the right to vote and we've stuck with it ever since. And sometime, I think in the 50s, we let men join too. So any men in the audience, you are also welcome to join the League anytime you might be interested. League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, but we are political. And by that I mean we study issues until we have a good understanding of them, and if we come to a consensus on that, we feel free to take action based on that decision. So when you hear about the League of Women Voters participating maybe in a lawsuit somewhere, or writing letters to the editor, or speaking before a legislative body, it's only because we have studied that issue and have the support of our membership behind that. If I could ask everybody to turn off their cell phones or put them on vibrate something. And we do not allow any cameras or videos during the presentation by the candidates. League is very possessive and proprietary about our forums, and we will have a video. Tonight we are on Channel 11, Community Access Television. That's on Comcast. Comcast is the only one who carries that. And we will have a streaming video, we hope, available at one of the local newspapers or on our own website, and I'll let you know about that if we're able to get that accomplished. Tonight we have the candidates for 3 different races. We have the 1st Congressional District will come first, and we have Gregory Cheadle, Heidi Hall, and Dan Levine. Mr. Lamalfa was not able to make it tonight. His staff said that he is in Washington where a vote had to be, he had to vote. So he was not able to make it tonight. The other races, we'll introduce the candidates when they come up, but they are for the state senator, for the 4th district, and the state assembly for the 3rd district. And tonight we have from the news media with us, we have Ashley Gebb of the Chico Enterprise Record and Tom Gascoigne from the Chico News and Review. All right, now I'd like the people in the audience who are league members helping out to stand up. I'll introduce you to. We have Linda Furr over there. I have two timers here, Sue Ellen Rollison and Marion Evans. They will keep track of how long the speakers are talking, and they will send them little signals when they're through talking so that they know when to stop talking. And then up here, I have Eleanor Anderson, our Director of Voter Service. I have Stephanie Gilbert, and I have Sean Murphy, who are also helping in the voter service area. So Eleanor, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Jane. So our first forum, again, is for the congressional race, and we are using the League of Women Voters format. Please, we ask that you hold all applause until this particular forum is completed. We know there are many here who have their favorite candidate. However, if we hold our applause, we will get to hear each candidate speak, and each candidate will have time to answer the questions. At the end, we can give all of the candidates a rousing round of applause. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 2 minutes for each closing statement, and 1 minute to respond to each question from either our news media representatives or questions from the audience. And we do really encourage audience participation. So if a question comes up to your mind, please raise your hand, and Linda will hand you a card that you can write your question on. Return it to Linda, and she will bring it up here to us, and we will ask the question for you. Our timekeepers have timing paddles. They have one for 1 minute. They have one for 30 seconds. There's another one for 15 seconds.
Oh, wow.
And at stop, you need to stop. Please, again, our candidates are seated in alphabetical order, and we will maintain alphabetical order. We're going to start with Mr. Cheadle for the opening statement, and then we're going to rotate order of question, who will be answering the question first. First question will go to Mr. Cheadle, then Heidi, then Mr. Levine, and then or Heidi, Ms. Hall, and then Ms. Hall will have first opportunity to answer the second question, and so on. So what I would like to do is, if we could please get started with opening statements. Mr. Cheadle. 2 minutes.
Government should be like fire. When it's limited, it will warm you. When it's left unchecked, it will consume you. A government that is left unchecked is coercive in its power and control. It seeks power and seizes power by lies, deceit, and propaganda. It seeks to bypass the Constitution, our rule of law, in favor of international law because our Constitution limits its power. It saddles us with taxes and regulations, not for any measurable difference in the environment, but to extort millions from the population, billions actually, quash small businesses, and ship jobs overseas. All this in order to form and further establish gigantic monopolies, thereby ensuring that the rich will be richer and the poor will be poorer. They saddle our children with trillions of dollars in debt, not for the poor, not for the needy, or for even homeless veterans, but for funding entitlement programs of billionaires in the form of subsidies, bailouts, and lucrative government contracts. Under the guise of the war on drugs and the war on terror, they instill fear in us to disarm us and dupe us into surrendering our freedom for the illusion of security. They use the NSA to spy on us, the TSA to intimidate us, the EPA to regulate us, and the IRS to extort us for the funding. No longer can we believe the lies. I am bold enough to question authority, determined enough to expose the lies, wise enough to follow the money, and responsible enough to represent we, the people. That is who I am, and that is what I will do as your representative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cheadle. Ms. Hall.
Thank you. thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate that people... Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate that people want to be educated about their potential representatives. I am running because I want to bring common sense leadership back to this district that's been neglected for far too long. I grew up in the Bay Area. I moved up to Grass Valley in 2005 after spending my summers and weekends there. I'm lucky enough to have had an excellent education through the public school system and then excellent universities thanks to government grants. And I paid all that money back and worked while I was in school. And I think that's something we still want for our children today and we no longer have. I have 2 children myself. My 19-year-old is in community college. My 23-year-old is a young veteran living in Tennessee on minimum wage, which is $7.25 there, and he's struggling to live on that wage. I am an advocate for my children and your children. I'm an advocate for bringing this country back to economic prosperity, and I'm an advocate for this region. We've had the most obstructionist Congress in history. Our representative is part of the cabal of extremists who have conspired to break this government. The system is broken, it's not working well, and they've gotten in there and decided to simply break it rather than fix it. He has voted to shut down the government, costing us $24 billion. He's voted against the Violence Against Women Act. He's voted to award himself massive crop subsidies while at the same time voting to restrict food stamps for the tens of thousands of folks in his district here who have children and rely on food stamps to get by. Again, I'm here to be an advocate for rural regions. I want to work across party lines. I'm not interested in ideological battles. I'm interested in helping our economy, in helping our people, and in standing up for our working families who are the backbone of this area. Thank you.
Mr. Levine.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Levine, and I am from Chico in Butte County. I'm a farmer here. I own a ranch in Concal that I tend. You heard much of what my opponents spoke about in their opening is pointing to the fact that government is broken today, and it is. It's disjointed from we the people. It's monopolized by special interests, and I think special interest is a term that no longer applies because due to the Supreme Court's ruling, corporations can donate unlimited amounts of money into the process at the congressional level, and now so can individuals. And so it's special interest just means who's got the most interest, who's got the deepest pockets and the will to try to get their way. And that's what these forums are here today and every day are for accessing the candidates and their ideas. And I am interested in ideological questions. It was Doug LaMalfa who tried to claim that ideological questions aren't always at issue, but it is. It's everything. And so today in America, we have problems. And I've studied in my time. I've got an associate's degree with an emphasis in business. I moved on to get my bachelor's degree at Rutgers University for political science, and now I'm pursuing a political science degree, master's degree here at Chico State. And the area of study I'm most interested in is the study of democracy, and specifically how we can gauge the strength or weakness in a democracy by looking at economic and civil liberty indicators, meaning how much economic freedom and access to start a business and to benefits do the people have, and how much actual access to real liberty like the freedom of speech and freedom of privacy and such freedoms have. And so, in wrap-up here, I would like to thank the fellow candidates here who are fine candidates for coming out, and for the associations and the media for putting this together, and for all of you for coming and participating. I look forward to the questions and addressing you more. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to throw the first question over to Ms. Gebb from the Enterprise Record.
So, Ms. Hall, you mentioned the importance of, working across party lines and not being focused on ideological battles. I'm interested to have all three of you talk about how you, in an instance in the past and when you worked across the aisle, worked with somebody who represents a different political background than you, and something that you were able to accomplish through that.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Let's see, in 1 minute. I have worked in public service most of my life with the federal and state agencies that regulate the environment and deal with natural resources. That's a very contentious place to work. The environmentalists don't think we ever go far enough, and some businesses think we go too far. Much of the work that I've done along the Mexico border or in pollution prevention activities has involved working with businesses to make sure that when we apply regulations to them or when we institute new programs, we make it so that it will work for them and that there is a level playing field. That's been a critical part of my background, is ensuring that there's a level playing field for businesses across the spectrum in the United States. I would also just refer to very recently that there was a forum on nursing homes up here, and the Republicans and the Democrats came together, and I was there, and worked up a strategy to go work with our state representatives to make sure that our nursing homes weren't closed here because of a loophole in the law, and we were successful at doing that, and that was a wonderful experience, and I can see us doing that again. Thank you.
Can the other two candidates answer the same question, giving an example of something that they've done working with another political party?
Sure. This is my second time running for political office. I ran for the state Senate seat here, the 4th District, to replace Mr. LaMalfa when he left the seat to pursue this seat for Congress. I myself have been a Democrat part of my life. I have never been a registered Republican, but I have voted Republican. Earlier in my life and studies, I believe that there were serious differences between the parties, but I think the ideological differences come from not party affiliation, but from social economic affiliation. And I think from my experience with working with friends and neighbors and family members who are Republican, and I'm running now as a Democrat, I found that you work with a person and you work on the issue. You don't look at the party. Party is how we define ourselves for organizational purposes. Issues are what rule the world. Issues are what truth is based on. And so you just work with the human beings around you who are our neighbors, and you work honestly and you work truthfully, and you work to solve a problem, and you don't get boiled down or bogged down in rhetoric. Thank you.
This is my second time running as well. In the first election, it's an eye-opener with respect to the political goings-on and the people that are entrenched in a given party. I'm an independent person, independent-minded. I'm not owned by any party, refuse to be owned by any party. And having lost in the primary as a Republican, what I ended up doing was supporting a Democrat, Jim Reed. And I supported Jim Reed not because he was a Democrat, not because I was trying to throw dirt in the Republicans' face, but I did that because I thought he was a man of honor, and I watched him on the political campaign trail, and I respected him, so I gave him my vote, my support. In addition to that, I contacted the Democrat students at Chico State, their club, twice, and was turned down twice. So I'm more than willing to work across the aisle and enjoy working with people from different perspectives. The problem often is that sometimes people are so entrenched that they are not willing to work with anyone else. I'm willing to work with people. I come from the private sector. I'm a small businessman. I'm working in the... Stop.
Sorry, Mr. Cheadle.
I'm sorry, I wasn't looking your way. I got it.
I wasn't looking your way either. Don't worry, I missed their signal too.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Gascoigne, you're next.
Okay, my first question, Ms. Hall has sort of touched on this, but I'm not sure who I'm addressing this to. Okay, Mr. Levine. What sort of civic experience do you have that qualifies you for this office?
Well, official government experience, the only experience I've had so far is having been a candidate for state senate. I've been a believer in bottom-up democracy, and the reason is because that's what we find in democratic studies, that democracy is, it's power by the people. And so what what I've done is I've always been vigilant in going to public meetings at the local level. In New Jersey, before I moved to California, I got started in that tradition when I ran into political trouble or political discrimination, so I accessed my system. But again, a big part of my political education has been studying the institutions of government and how they actually relate to the people, in that how do they interact with the people. And so in that study, what I find today is that we have a problem with access. We can vote, we can call our representatives, but they aren't beholden to us in the same way. And so my experience educationally is to try to find ways that we can revigorate the connection between government and the will of the people.
Mr. Cheadle.
You know, the qualifications for Congress are rather slim. And so, you know, 25, no, I mean, really, and they're slim purposely. They're slim purposely because our government was designed so that everybody could feel as though they had a part in it. It wasn't designed for royalty the way it is now. But anyway, the point I want to get to is that I'm way beyond those qualifications. You know, I spent 12 years in the ER, volunteering in the ER. I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree, I have an emergency teaching credential, I have a concentration in healthcare administration, I have a law degree, doctorate of jurisprudence. I have a whole lot of things, but beyond that, you have to have the fire and the willingness to make a change in society. When you see wrongs being committed, you have to have the guts to address those wrongs and say that's not right. That's not what the American people deserve. That's not what the American people are going to get. That's what you have to have. This silliness that we look at now with respect to qualifications is what's causing the mess that we're in today.
Thank you, Mr. Cheadle. Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I'll start with my education because I do think it's important in this case. I have a bachelor's in international relations from Pomona College, a master's in international relations from Columbia University, and a second master's in public policy from Eagleton Institute in New Jersey. I've had multiple courses in economics and politics and political theory, and I find that very important today to be able to read critically what's going on and what people are saying and distinguish truth from fiction. I've also been in leadership positions most of my life. In college, I represented the students when we had a complaint with the faculty in my graduate program. And I have been on the boards of several nonprofits. I actually co-created a nonprofit myself in Grass Valley a couple years ago so that we could bring better information to the public about a gold mine that wanted to open in town. I'm also a mother who's been involved with bringing 2 kids up in this day and age and watching them struggle in this economy. And I have a fire in my belly as well about making the world a better place for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Our first question from the audience, we're going to start with Mr. Cheadle. And the question is what are your thoughts about the Affordable Care Act?
The Affordable Care Act is a nightmare. My major opposition with the Affordable Care Act is that the individual mandate is unconstitutional. Not only that, the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, has a religious liberty component that frightens me. Never in the history of this country has the Constitution or the Supreme Court or the President or Congress defined what religion is. The Obamacare Act, or whatever, they go on and define what you must believe in addition to having a component that punishes you for your beliefs. That's a major issue. Obamacare is not about health care, it's about control. Moreover, billions upon billions of dollars because of Obamacare are now funneled into big pharmaceutical companies, and it's also being funneled into the large health insurance companies.
Thank you. Ms. Hall.
Yes. It was necessary to do something. Our healthcare system was broken, the costs were rising astronomically, and the Affordable Care Act came on the scene as a compromise. I've been interesting to see the news today in the last few days that it looks like the Republicans are stopping the fight against it because so many of their constituents are telling them to stop because they're happy with the services they can now get. I think it's a moral imperative that a country this rich provides health care to its citizens, and as a economic moderate, I also think we need to do it cost effectively. I don't think the Affordable Care Act is perfect. I would like to see Congress do its job and provide some fixes to it rather than simply try to repeal it or do nothing. But I do think it's a really great next step towards what we really need in this country, which is single-payer health care. Thank you.
Mr. Levine.
Well, I'd have to say I agree with the sentiments of both my fellow candidates here, but really, I think the issue is there are some ills that were fixed in the system by the Affordable Care Act. It was a compromise. It was a very lengthy legislative process led by Mr. Tom Dashiell, former senator. President Obama picked him to be the chief facilitator of the process with his savvy. And there was a lot of sausage making. You had two different sides, while both involved in the pharmaceutical industry and involved in regulation and money. Both sides did have a different interest. What I would have liked is I would have liked not only a single-payer system or a single-payer system in name, but I just feel it's a travesty in this country that we're able to spend, especially on warfare, but yet we're still not able to guard the health and safety of our own people. I think if our child or if our seniors or if we ourselves or if anyone is playing in the park or walking down the street and is injured, I think it's a prerogative of us to take care of our people and to have that be done as a governmental service. But it's an intermediate step. Thank you.
Do we get to rebut at all?
You need to save comments for rebuttals for your closing statement.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, sorry. Ashley, next question.
What needs to change within congressional representation in this district? The incumbent isn't here tonight to defend himself, but is there anything that you agree on?
Heidi, Ms. Hall, sorry.
Thank you for the question. I'm digging deep because I think I'm sure that our congressional representative cares about this district, but he cares in a different way than I do. His ideas are to not do anything so that the free market can take its do its thing. But for me, the free market has always been compromised, and we need to be, as a rural area where we have higher unemployment and higher poverty than anywhere else, we need to be proactive in advocating for the things that this district needs. So I think we have a great disagreement on that. I would hope that if we were ever in a situation to work together, we could sit down and look at specifics in this district. For example, I'm big on trying to get broadband up here. It's a critical issue for small businesses. It's one of my major themes in the economics, and I would hope to get him to agree that that's something that a representative should be advocating for. But I don't know if he is now.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Levine.
Well, you know, we do live in the same county. We're both farmers. I've talked to Doug quite a few times at different political and social events, you know, anywhere from small chat to intermediate farm talk. It was actually news to him. I was the one who brought to his attention that California had actually passed hemp farming. It's now legal in California. He hadn't heard that, but I saw the proprietary look in his eye when his brows raised, and I saw that he's, as a farmer and a landholder, was interested in pursuing that. And so I said, Doug, I think you owe me a 10% partnership fee for bringing this to your attention. And me, he, and his wife all had a good chuckle about it. But no, we don't agree on quite a bit too. And really the issue of access, you know, he was sent to Washington to represent us, but yet he is running for re-election, and I think we deserve the reaffirmation of why he thinks he should run again. And I think we could use some kind of governmental change where we had access, some kind of mandated access to candidates, maybe even a recess, congressional recess for candidates to come home to debate. Thank you.
Mr. Cheadle.
I think Mr. Lamothe and I can't speak for him, but I'm assuming that we feel the same way about this, and that's Obamacare. That's too much power that we've given government. You can have health care, but you don't have to have the individual mandate that goes along with it. The independent payment something board, also known as the death panel, is a curse because it does not allow for judicial review. You think you have problems now in healthcare with respect to pre-existing conditions, so forth and so on. Wait till this thing really takes effect. You won't be able to go to court. You can't sue. You can't do any of that stuff. Moreover, it opens the door to the horrors of the past with respect to euthanasia, forced vaccinations, and forced sterilization of women. And Mr. Lamothe and I also share in common agriculture. You go back several generations. His father was a great-grandfather, whatever, was a rice farmer. Mine were picking cotton.
Thank you. Mr. Gascoigne, you have the next question.
Well, how do you defeat an incumbent in this district? Mr. Lamothe's predecessor, Wally Herger, was in office for nearly 3 decades, and that only ended when he decided not to run for re-election. So, seriously, it's got to be a challenge.
Mr. Levine, you're first.
Well, it's a good question, and certainly I'm not a big money raiser. Last time I ran, I didn't raise a single penny except for $2,000 of my own money to pay the fees and a ballot statement. This time around, I've raised about $1,200 from other individuals to help me raise the fee, but I have no other donations. But I'm running an ideological campaign, and I'm trying to strengthen our country and our candidates as a whole by speaking about these subjects. And I think the way to do it is you can't just materialize money out of nowhere. If you have donors, you can go tit for tat. But I think we need to look at the candidates, and we need to not be smitten anymore with simply who has more money or who has more TV commercials. We have to be concerned with the ethical coherence of the candidate and the issue coherence of the candidate. And I think in this case, we need to chip away at the moneyed image of the best candidate being the old establishment big money figure. I think we need to chip away at the ethic of not appearing, of being inaccessible, of hiding behind your dollars, behind assuming that dollars reign as king. And we need to chip away at the issues, and the candidates can do that over time. Thank you.
Mr. Cheadle.
First of all, Mr. Lamothe has a trusted position. Once that trust is gone, he's gone. He does not own that seat. The people own that seat. He is beatable. Once people begin to see that he represents establishment government, it's over. Because people are tired of government being the all-powerful, the almighty, and we have to bow down to that. In addition, when people see others coming along who are not bought, who have not sold out, that gives them hope. The people here running give you guys hope because you see in us people who are not bought, people who have not sold their souls just to get in office and to represent the filthy rich. Just like he said, $1,200, raise. Our opponent could get that in a matter of seconds, but he's going to have to pay in another way.
Thank you, Mr. Cheadle. Ms. Hall.
We can defeat this incumbent by getting the word out about the fact that his votes are hurting his own constituents and his own district. I've spent a year already campaigning, both getting the word out about why and how I will be a very good congresswoman, but also making sure people understand what his votes are doing. And I'm reaching out to the journalists a lot right now, hoping that you will help to do that as we get through this primary. I've been on the stump for a year, and I have heard across the board from women that they're sick and tired of the war on women that the Republicans are waging, and I expect that a number of them will not be voting for him this time around. I also think that the more we let people know what his votes are, the more they're going to make sure that he doesn't come back in again.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm combining 2 audience questions, so I apologize to the question writers. But we have 2 questions that are very closely related. And this also goes a little bit to congressional spending, because national forests comprise a large percentage of the area surrounding us. And specifically in this congressional district, there's an issue of forest fires, and in certain of the rural areas up around Cohasset Ridge, and up in Paradise, is a need to extend routes out of the area in case of a major forest fire or other emergency. So how can you as our congressional representative help move an issue like this forward? That is a big concern to rural residents. That's a good question. Who is first? That would be Mr. Cheadle. You're first.
First of all, we have to work with the locals with this. We have to work with actually with all levels with this because of the fire danger as well. So we have to coordinate. And in order to do that, again, you have to deal with all these bureaucracies. And that's ultimately what it's going to have to do. But also we have to deal with the funding that goes along with that. We have to have a plan. It's one thing to say we need these things, but another thing to have a plan. We've got to work on a plan and somehow between all of us get that plan together and fund it, and hopefully we'll have a good result.
Ms. Hall.
Along with bringing broadband up here and getting to a seat at the table on water issues in this district, dealing with our forests is one of my top priorities. We've had mismanaged forests for over 30 years, and there is a way to deal with it. We've got a Quincy Library Group that hasn't been very well supported. It's no longer funded, I hear. I would get that established and expand it. We need to go in there and do some responsible thinning. We can bring our biomass facilities up to par, make sure we are creating new jobs by doing that. I certainly see the possibility of a public-private partnership so that we are working with those federal and state agencies that are managing the forests and bring in private contractors to help do the work. But it's a critical issue, and it would be one of the top priorities of mine.
Well, it's an issue that I actually live and breathe. I am a rural resident. My ranch is in Concal on 80 acres. It was severely burned by about 70% of the existing timber and vegetation in the 2008 fire. That was a fire that was lit as a backfire by CAL FIRE for the purpose of trying to save the neighborhood. Contrary to local advice from local fire professionals, 250 households were burnt down to the ground. I myself bought the property after the fire, was only able to afford it because of the fire and the decimation that it brought to the area. I sleep in a tent in my dwelling on my land, usually at least 4 or 5 nights a week, tending farm, especially in the summer, and it is a concern. I had to go so far as to bring a bulldozer up to my property to restore roads that had been covered and laid to waste by the fire, and also to do legal, exempted grading work and clearing work to clear dangerous fire brush away from my dwelling, yet Butte County misinterpreted their own ordinance and came after me for illegal grading and a blatant misinterpretation of their own ordinance. And so it's an issue we need to get real on. And by real, I mean honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Ms. Gebb.
Do you support or oppose an increase in the federal minimum wage?
Yep.
I support an increase in the federal minimum wage. I see with my own son that he's had to go get food stamps because $7.25 is not enough to raise a family on. So when we aren't, and minimum wage has not been raised in over 20 years, what we're doing when we don't raise that minimum wage is we're not helping create more jobs or keep more jobs. We're simply shifting the cost of the worker to the government in less efficient ways. When people have to go get food stamps, when people have to go get help because they're losing their homes, when people have to get help because they can no longer apply for jobs, we're doing crisis management. If we ensure that people are paid what they're worth, and when you look at this distinction between people who at the top are making and what people at the bottom are making, we know there's enough money out there to pay them for their value. Then we're going to bring a lot of people out of poverty, and we're going to save the costs of crisis programs as well.
Mr. Levine.
Well, in 2003, my family business, which was a wholesale foods distribution, beef, frozen potatoes, fresh vegetables, all kinds of things, we had to close our doors and go bankrupt. And At that time, gasoline was about 89 cents a gallon, or excuse me, 99 cents, and diesel was 89 cents, and you know, a gallon of milk was near $1, and a pound of chicken was 99 cents. Well, inflation has brought those prices in almost every case categorically almost 400%. We're now paying $4 for a gallon of milk and gasoline, and so that was done by will. Industry colludes, both legally and illegally, to price fix, and what we see today is unprecedented robber baron-style monopolization, creating unprecedented inflation, meaning our dollar is worth less. A $50,000 salary wasn't a great salary in 2000. It's probably even a better salary today because of unemployment rates. So yes, I do support a minimum wage increase, if for no other reason, because it's the kind of forceful declaration we need, that people need more to survive. That's simply, if we're going to make money out of nothing through inflation, we need to inflate wages.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Mr. Cheadle.
Raising the minimum wage is an answer, but I doubt if it is the answer. Giving government the power to determine in a de facto way what minimum wage is also gives government the de facto power to determine what the maximum wage is. Nowhere in the Constitution is there a guarantee of wages. This goes to Roosevelt's Bill of Rights, not the Constitution's Bill of Rights. We run the risk of decreasing jobs, run the risk of people working fewer hours. Government is a true winner in all this. If you took the average, now, and then with raising minimum wage, $1,000 easily is going to go to the government in the form of new taxes. It puts the person at risk for having to contribute more to their Obamacare. So I don't know that raising the minimum wage is the answer. Again, it is an answer, but I don't think it is the answer. Their rents are going to go up. You did me again.
Those ladies,
they're dangerous.
They are, and they have paddles. So, Mr. Gascoigne.
Do you, who am I directing this to? I'm sorry.
Probably.
Okay.
Mr. Mr. Levine's first.
Do you support how President Obama is reacting to the situation in Ukraine?
No, I think it's very, very troubling. The issue, as I see it, was that we supported a regime, meaning we supported a presidential candidate with deep Western influence from money and social channels outside of the mainstream of his country. We did this, as we do across the world, to try to gain influence and favor for various reasons involving trade of food and other resources and of weapons and of military impacts. Well, Russia did the same thing to us in the Russian missile crisis. They tried to make a treaty and influence Cuba, which is only 90 miles away from our border. Well, Ukraine directly borders Russia. So essentially 30 years later, we're still trying to start World War III, but this time we're doing the same act of aggression we accused the Russians of, and then blaming it on the Russians again. So I don't agree with that at all. I think the sovereignty of the people was expressed, and that Russia is protecting its sphere, and we may not agree today with spheres, but it's a practical reality that nuclear bomb-holding nations do get to flex their military might, and I think we shouldn't be baited into another war. Thank you.
Mr. Cheadle.
You know, I wish I was privy to more information, but as it is now, my concern is that we are stretched so thin as a nation. We are downsizing our military, and at the same time, because of our monetary policies with respect to monopoly, so forth and so on, we are actually building up the Chinese military. So we're becoming more vulnerable to many nations throughout the world. With respect to Mr. Obama and his policies toward what's happening in Ukraine, it's frightening that we could, in fact, be baited into another war, not necessarily with the Russians, but if we go over there, then we've exposed ourselves to any number of nations. And it's scary to think that in just a matter of days or weeks that we could be speaking a different language because we would have been taken over.
Ms. Hall.
Yes. The Ukraine gained its independence at high cost. It was willing to give up every last bit of its nuclear weapons with the agreement that Russia would never invade its borders. Russia has broken numerous international treaties. They're a danger to international law right now. And my empathy, my heart goes out to the Ukrainians. Nevertheless, that is in the sphere of influence of the Soviet Union. It's not an area we can be engaging in and should not be engaging in militarily. Our president has stated that, and I agree with that. They are ratcheting up more and more economic sanctions. Those sanctions, by all accord, are hurting them. They're trying to hurt the people in power rather than people on the ground, and I support that as well. I don't know how this is going to end up. I don't know if the economic sanctions are going to be enough to get Putin to back off, but I do know that we cannot be putting military boots on the ground and that we must continue to try the methods that we're trying now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring us back to an issue of domestic policy. Basically, we're going to talk pot. There's a tension between federal law, and the Constitution, Federal Supremacy Clause, versus what states are doing in terms of marijuana, whether legalizing it for medical use or decriminalizing it for medical and recreational use. So the question is, do you support the decriminalization of marijuana? And if yes or no, how would you address this in Congress? And we are starting with Mr. Cheadle.
You know, we are a drug culture, and that concerns me. Federal law does trump state law with respect to marijuana. The problem arises when and if it is decriminalized. That's one issue. The other issue is what happens now with those who are high on marijuana and they get involved in accidents that damage property or person. In the courts where I am, I see people coming in all the time driving under the influence of drugs. So it's not enough to decriminalize it. We've got to now look at solutions as to what we do when these people are under the influence. It's one thing to have the right to do it in your house, but your rights do not trump the rights of someone else that you damage. And that's what we have to look at.
Thank you. Ms. Hall.
I agree that federal law trumps state law, although in this case I would like to see that states have the opportunity to try out different types of regulations around marijuana. Right now we've got illegal grows that are trashing with toxic chemicals our forests. They're also sucking up a lot of water illegally at a time that we're in a drought, and there's a dangerous gun culture around illegal grows. I would like to see this regulated. I would like to see us bring in some revenue to the areas where there are grows, and I would like to see us protect the small growers and make sure that we aren't giving over legalized marijuana to big corporations. I would be very careful and slow about regulating it. Right now I'm very interested in watching what Colorado is doing in Washington. We're seeing where they're finding bumps and where things aren't working so well. I think what we should do is start drafting regulations, do some research, and be prepared to bring something forward when we know more.
Thank you. Mr. Levine.
Well, I'm a medical cannabis patient and a medical cannabis farmer. I do believe that it is time to regulate medical marijuana. I regulate myself. I'm a best practices kind of individual. My practices are better than many others I've observed in my community of fellow farmers, and that's because I'm a student of science and I have a farming background from living next to farmers for years and things. But the point is that regulation is good. Regulation keeps industry honest. And the kind of grows that Ms. Hall has talked about are illegal grows being perpetrated by illegal, often from out-of-the-nation criminal cartels. I alluded earlier to a lawsuit that Butte County had engaged against me where they alleged illegal grading activities. Well, they also alleged the potential of all types of polluting and other runoff issues. Well, I spent nearly $12,000 with a professional geologist firm from Humboldt County that specializes in working for the federal government, cleaning up these cartels to certify that, in fact, my garden was not only safe and compliant under the law, but that it would be a pioneering best practices for others. So I believe we need a scientific approach, both with the use of cannabis and also the cultivation. We have the ability, and we're going to move forward with it.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Ms. Gebb, next question's to you.
What are your thoughts on the changes in the composition of the most recent Farm Bill? Is there anything you would have liked to have seen done differently?
Yes, several things. The first is that while they reduced subsidies, they increased crop insurance. There's billions of dollars being paid directly to 18 crop insurance companies to cover the costs of farmers, whether they farm or not, whether they have a successful crop or not. That just shifted the subsidy from direct payments to crop insurance, and thereby enriching a whole other sector of corporate sector. They also took away transparency, so after this bill passed, we will no longer be able to see who is getting how many subsidies. And there's also a provision in there that it does not have to be voted on again. It doesn't have to be voted on every 5 years. All of this tells me that there are issues in that bill that are not good. That transparency issue is huge. We should know what's in the bill. They should have to vote on it regularly, and we should be able to see who's getting what.
Mr. Levine.
Well, you know, it's what I would have liked to have seen in the Farm Bill. You know, the Farm Bill is supposed to cover farmers. It covers all agricultural crops and the people who produce them. And it's a fundamental disequality in science that many have been using for a long time to justify things like subsidies. You know, a lot of these subsidies are subsidizing dirty farming practices that are not good, that are polluting our land. Rice farming is one of the most dirtiest water polluting farming there is. It doesn't mean we need to abandon rice. It means that if I was rice farming, I'd be looking to do it more organically. But what I would like to have seen in the Farm Bill is there was an approval at the federal level for hemp research in coordination with the Department of Agriculture. What I would have liked to have seen is a step further. I would have liked to have seen funding for United States domestic medical cannabis and cannabis hemp funding that would allow us to really dial in on the science that's being done in laboratories in 30 other nations like Israel and Britain and France. It's a pharmaceutical product that's being traded on the stock exchange. So let's get in touch with the farm realities of cannabis, hemp, and cannabis in the federal level.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Mr. Cheadle.
I have major issues with the Farm Bill. In it, there's a protection for a certain type of rice that a certain person running for office farms. That's one thing. Second thing is the transparency issue is huge. How is it that our officials can draft legislation that makes it virtually improbable that we will discover how much they're getting? Moreover, there's a little semantics game going on. No longer is it called subsidies. They're using the term crop insurance. It sickens me that they would enrich themselves by taking from the poor with respect to food stamps. 11 billionaires received farm subsidies. 11 billionaires receiving farm subsidies. There's something wrong. And again, the way government is structured, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Thank you. Mr. Gascoigne.
This question does not necessarily come under congressional jurisdiction, but it's a hot topic here, particularly in Butte County, and recently brought up. I'd like to know your take on the practice of fracking.
I think that's Dan.
Well, I don't know if any of you here read the Chico Enterprise record. I'm sure many do. I do. I had spoken at the meeting the county supervisors had to ban fracking, and I had gotten quite passionate, even making comments that the formation of a militia may be necessary to protect our lands from the abomination of fracking. And frankly, I'd like to reinforce that statement. And when I say militia, I don't mean some kind of violent coup. But I mean the forceful declaration that we're not going to allow big corporate, international, or even local interests basically drill thousands of feet into our most precious aqua resources and inject a mystery cocktail of cancer-causing and life-ending chemicals. It's an abomination. Okay, Oregon just dumped who knows how many billion gallons of water down the drain because a teenager urinated in a reservoir. Okay, and that we're going to give license to drill and contaminate all water, the foundation of life. It's an abomination, and I applaud the supervisors for banning it. We should do it nationally.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Mr. Cheadle.
Mr. Levine is right on the money. It's sick that we have corporations that have so much power. Anytime you have big business and big government, you have a big mess. Our country is for sale, congressional district by congressional district. Our environment then has become for sale. Are we willing to risk contaminating all that groundwater, all those aquifers, just for profit? We'll have trillions of dollars, but we can't drink the water. We can't raise our crops. So, no, from what I've seen about fracking, I could not be in agreement with it.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Yeah, fracking uses over 600 different kinds of chemicals, and we're not even allowed to see what some of those are because of the privacy laws for business. It also uses hundreds of thousands, up to 500,000 gallons per well to do the fracking. In this state, in a time of drought, when we've oversubscribed our water already, fracking is not wise. We must protect our aquifers. We need to know more about the chemicals they're using. We need to make sure the wells that they're using are properly protected and regulated, and none of that has happened yet. If there is a way to frack that is environmentally sound and economically feasible, I could support it. But it is neither of those right now, and I don't think it ever will be. And I also applaud the Butte County Board of Supervisors in a nonpartisan fashion for banning fracking in this county.
Thank you. I want to continue on with water. We have a question from the audience about, what are your thoughts on the Central Valley Water Project and the federal control over California's water supply? That's a very big issue right now in our drought. And I believe we start with Mr. Cheadle.
Could you repeat the last part of that question? Was it state versus fed?
Yeah, it's, what are your thoughts on the Central Valley Water Project and the federal control over California's water supply? We have this mixture in California of state controls, individual water rights, surface water, the first rights, and then the combination of the federal water projects that occurred to create, Shasta Dam and the other dams. So we have this mixed water system, so to speak.
Yeah, you have a mixed and a mess. It's tough because who does own the water? It's like up in Northern California, further up north, you get into issues with the Indians and their burial grounds and their tribal land and so forth and so on. Then you have the feds, then you have the state, then you have, this thing about the water tunnel, you have the reservoir, so forth and so on. Ultimately, the problem comes in that the water is up north and not down south. We have to find a way to manage that water. I don't know what it is. I'm against building a tunnel because it's so expensive. The price that they give us now is not the price that it's going to be upon completion, and heaven forbid there's an earthquake, it's going to be even worse. So we've got to find a way to get water to the farmers, but then again, the question with them is, it's not feeding America. About 40% of the crops that are raised here are exported. So that's another issue with respect to how much water does that area need.
Thank you. Ms. Hall.
That's a huge question for 1 minute. I'm going to try to answer what I can. And I've worked on water issues for a number of years now. The more I learn that I still don't know. I think the issue is not so much whether it's federal or state control. The issue is that we've overcommitted the water that we have. We've promised water to people that we will never get. And so we've set it up for a fight. In addition, there's a whole issue of water law. I took an entire course on water law, and we have people who have rights that who are now pumping water, more water than they need in the north, and selling it to the south while they're rancher neighbors are going without water. That's a huge, huge ball of wax to unwrap, but it's time we start looking at the water rights issue. In addition, we're going to have to look at localized solutions. So in the North State, we need to be protecting our groundwater, making sure that's not going to be a greed grab. In the Central Valley, they're going to have to stop planting orchards in the desert and asking us to provide their water. And in the southern part of the state, with the large urban areas, they're going to have to start looking at desalination. When we start pricing water correctly, we'll start dealing with this properly.
Thank you, Mr. Levine.
Well, water should be cheap, and it should be abundant, and it should be clean, and it should remain that way forever. Water is the most abundant substance on Earth. It's a simple molecule. The oceans are being acidified by pollution and other things. Well, some words on federal versus state sovereignty. We are all people. We live under the federal authority, we live under the state authority, we live in a local jurisdiction. Well, all that authority stems from us, the individuals. As it pertains to water use, we have rights. The state of California has it right in our state constitution, Article 10, page 220 of the most current 2013-14 state legislature edition of the California Constitution. And the federal Constitution, Article 1, talks about the state's right of eminent domain over water, but also the riparian right. The riparian right is the right of the person, the citizen, the residing individual, the sovereign on the land who has access to that water and shall not be discriminated against in the beneficial use of. And so I think we need to make sure our water is going to good use here in California and then abroad after.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Ms. Gebb, your final question for this set of candidates?
Let's talk about immigration. Do you support or oppose a comprehensive immigration reform bill that would include a path to citizenship for people in this country illegally?
Ms. Hall.
I do support a comprehensive immigration reform bill and program. We currently have, that includes a path to citizenship. We have people right now, you've got a fellow right here in Chico who has spent 10 years trying to get his citizenship and then wasn't able to actually practice law even though he could pass the bar. We have many, many people like that who they come to this country illegally, or they're born in this country, and then they get on this path to citizenship which is not functional, and they're living in limbo for years. They actually contribute to our economy. They're an important part of our labor force. The farmers need them, small businesses need them. And we need to do something for them as well. Now, the issue of them getting here illegally is unfortunate, but that's because the system is broken, and we are going to need to find a better way to deal with the immigrants who are already here and then create a path that's functional in the future.
Mr. Levine.
Well, in my opinion, if you're a flesh and blood human being and you're residing here in the United States and you consider yourself an American, you're an American. And, you know, I have a very mixed heritage. I have European heritage, I have Jewish heritage, I have Catholic tradition, Jewish tradition, but I also have Native American tradition as well. And so I'm a personal conundrum. It's a bit of a joke here, but my Native American side says, well, are you going to hate your European conquesting side forever? And the answer is no. The answer is not to try to decide who was where first, and the idea is we need to respect life. Okay, we've had all types of immigration in this country, including the establishment in California, which was done by force, by the establishment of a fortress that was the city of Sacramento. It was done by, you know, John Sutter, who was a Swiss national, who declared his personal sovereignty and Mexican sovereignty and established what would become California. So I believe in respecting life. I believe we do have a process and should have a process for legal entry, and we should not be exploiting immigrants against American workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Mr. Cheadle.
I think with respect to the immigration issue, I don't know what comprehensive is. I mean, that sounds like a government word where they can put anything that they want. But beyond that, the question to me is, how many are going to come? We announce we're going to have amnesty or whatever. How many are going to come to this country? Will we even recognize this country any longer? I was down in Southern California. I didn't know if I was in Mexico, El Salvador, or Honduras, or Colombia. I didn't know where I was. So I'm concerned about it used to be a culturation and clock. Anyway, that concerns me. But in the interim, what we need to do is stop giving benefits to those who are not citizens of the United States. We are a nation of laws. We have a rule of law. That's the Constitution that should be followed. Once we abandon the law, anything can go. And so again, what concerns me is how many people are we willing to accept over here illegally? And what do we do with those who do come? Those people can do property damage, kill people, and there's no paper record on them. We can't catch them. They can go across the border, they can hide, they can do whatever they want to do. We don't have any way of finding those people. That concerns me.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Cheadle. Mr. Gascoigne, your last question to these candidates.
Do you support the construction of a pipeline that would bring oil from Canada to the United States? I believe it's called the Keystone Pipeline.
Is that who? All right.
Dan's first, yeah. Mr. Levine.
Well, you know, I need to do more research on that pipeline project. My current understanding, and it may be wrong, is that most of that oil won't even make it for domestic use. It's actually, we're just licensing the breezeway, so to speak, or the easement. Most of that oil is being bought directly by China from Canada, but that may be incorrect. I don't think we can abandon our oil resources, and I think to the extent that we can safely harvest them on land, because I believe on land drilling is safer than ocean drilling, that we utilize them, but I think we need to look at sustainable energies. So as it stands, I think it could be a problem, but I'm going to reserve a final opinion. I haven't looked at enough of the details. I will just say one comment. What I am in favor of is pumping water for desalination projects. I just think it's an unfortunate social thought that we have that we can pump oil, a very heavy viscous fluid, in large diameter pipelines across the Balkans, across the interior United States, but yet we can't pump water to a desert to desalinate it. It's just it's a silly notion. Again, water is the most abundant resource on Earth, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cheadle.
We do need to be energy independent, but the key question to me is, why is the Keystone pipeline not being built? 500 trucks a day come out of there hauling that oil. 500 trucks a day. Plus there's a railroad. Interestingly enough, as I said earlier, when you mix big business and big government, you have a big mess. The railroad that hauls that stuff out of there is Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Burlington Northern Santa Fe is owned by Warren Buffett, a friend of the Obama administration, and so now we have people tied up in government demanding that they be enriched at the expense of the poor. The Keystone Pipeline would make numerous jobs, but rather than have other people employed, the poor employed, we make certain that the rich stay rich and the poor get poor.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
The XL pipeline would bring a huge amount of toxic slurry of oil and other materials through the entire country, potentially to be produced and then shipped overseas. It's also, it goes against everything we're trying to do for energy independence as well as for clean energy. There are hundreds and thousands of jobs to be had in clean energy if we move towards that. This is not the way to go. We're going backwards when we're looking at mining this kind of toxic oil. In addition, building that pipeline has involved taking people's lands away, and that's not something we should be doing for business reasons without deep thought.
Thank you. I'm going to be asking our last question of the evening from an audience member. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if I did not get to ask a question that you wanted to ask the candidates, I am sure they will be happy to talk with you during our break when we reset for the next forum. So please do make sure, I'm sure they'd be very happy to meet you and answer any further questions you might have. I'm going to bring this back closer to our community. We've talked about farming, we've talked about small business and the poor, and government programs. But it's what can Congress do to address what's going on with college students? We've seen massive increases in tuition over the past 15 to 20 years. College loans have become a large issue and are predicted to be the next financial bubble. So what can Congress do to address the issues facing college students in this area in terms of both economics after they finish college, plus the economics of just attending? And Mr. Cheadle, we're going to start with you again.
Well, you know, college is not a guarantee for a job. I mean, colleges now are granting all types of, for lack of a better word, off-the-wall degrees that do not make a person employable. That's one thing. The second thing is, interestingly enough, is that by the government extending loans to the universities, so forth and so on, they end up actually, by default, having the cost of colleges raised because the colleges know that the money's there. And so that's a nasty mix. What's going to hurt this country more than anything is that we will have over $1 trillion in student loan debt. That's our next financial bubble that is going to burst. And how in the world we're going to manage that, I don't know. And I hate to be an elitist, but we're going to have to get to the point where we are only going to fund programs that make people employable.
Thank you, Mr. Cheadle. Ms. Hall.
Yeah, I probably mentioned this already, but I got an education based I was capable of getting because of federal loan grants. That federal loan required that I work while I was studying and that I pay it all back. So I was a working full-time student with grants and loans. 10 years after I graduated in a good job, with a good career at a good salary, I was able to pay back every dime of that loan. That was a win-win for everyone, win for our country, win for me as a mother, a win for my employers. We need to have that again. We need to make it possible for our students to get low-interest loans that they can pay back. Benefits our country. We have then an educated populace, which is critical to a functioning democracy. We also need to be looking at what's going on in the universities. The more I look at it, the more I'm seeing that there are some issues there with them becoming profit-making entities rather than educational institutions whose first and foremost priority should be graduating well-educated students.
Mr. Levine.
Well, ignorance leads to almost all ills in the world. It's the ignorant that those with malice are able to take advantage of. It's those who don't know the truth or don't know their rights. And there's even an old Roman maxim of law, he who would be deceived, let them. It's almost a way to say that if you don't know your rights, then we have a right to discriminate against you and subjugate you. Well, education is at crisis. I myself am still struggling to pay for my education. I'm a graduate student. Well, I've fallen in hard financial times defending my name against a criminal and civil matter, both fraudulent by the County of Butte. During my bachelor's degree, I had to take on debt, but they changed the law so that student debt is no longer forgivable in bankruptcy. It's now, you can go to debtor's prison, essentially. It's slavery. We've now enslaved our students. We've overturned, it's the only kind of specific debt on earth that you can't declare bankruptcy over. It's an abomination, and it's designed to keep us ignorant. And I agree with Mr. Cheadle that it's important to be employable, but it's also important to be intelligent and to raise ourselves up from ignorance.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Each candidate now has an opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement, and we're going to go ahead and start with Mr. Cheadle.
I'm first again?
You want to go first again?
No, I thought we were going to do it. Never mind. Little house cleaning. With respect to green jobs, again, big business and big government, what a mess we have. Government, 80% of the money for green jobs went to Obama's supporters. Filed bankruptcy. SunPower, $1.5 billion. First Solar, $1.4 billion. Kennedy Jr. got $1.4 billion. It's not going to be seen in our pockets again. Freedom is not free. No longer is it a choice between Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, and liberals. It's nonpartisan or non-existent. That's where we are today as a nation. My friends, we must aggressively fight to enjoy the pains of freedom, or we will surely suffer the horrors of tyranny. The best gift we can give our children is a nation that is free. In order for that to happen, we must come together as we the people to fight for our freedom, or we will perish as the most foolish of fools. Not only do I talk the talk, I walk the walk. I'm a candidate for all the people. I'm not owned by any party or special interest or corporate interest. I don't take funds from outside the district. My campaign signs, materials, and everything are from local businesses, not from the internet, from some distant place. I'm a volunteer in the ER. I've been in the ER for 12 years. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, did pre-med, didn't go to medical school because my son developed cancer, so that just knocked me out the ball game. I have an emergency teaching credential, master's in public administration, emphasis in healthcare administration, doctorate of jurisprudence, the law degree, public defender intern. I'm a small business owner and a real estate broker. And people are often asked, well, what can I do as a person? What you need to do, in addition to voting for me, of course, is that you must boycott these large corporations. You must boycott these large banks because they are the ones that are causing the trouble in this country. Thank you very much, and thank Cheadle for Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Cheadle. Ms. Hall.
Well, I want to thank you first, everyone, for coming out tonight, and I was thrilled with the questions. These are serious questions that deserve serious attention from our Congress, and it's important that we all understand what's going on and know what our representatives stand for. I am in this race specifically because I am so dismayed with the representation we've had here. I like to liken it to a private industry. If you go to a private industry, you ask them to hire you, they bring you in, they give you a nice office with a window, you put your feet up and you say, I'm going to break this place. I don't like the way it works. I'm not going to abide by the policies. I'm going to bankrupt it. That person would be fired. That's the kind of representation we have right now. We have representatives who will refuse to bring the immigration bill up for a vote. They refuse to put together a budget that can be worked on across the aisle. He's refusing to, immigration already, bring up to vote. The budget that was just proposed by Congress, the last one, the last Paul Ryan budget, cuts veterans' benefits. It cuts the Pell Grant, which would help students get an education. It cuts unemployment insurance. It completely eliminates disaster relief funding, and we're going to need that when we have our fire up here. And it does not touch a single one of the corporate loopholes that are making it possible for corporations to pay zero taxes in some cases or to get subsidies to get money back in other cases. I believe that government has a real role in this in our current society. Federal government, state government, and local governments are all necessary to make things run. What's important is that we put someone in Congress who is willing to work in that system to fix it where it's broken and to advocate for this area that needs so much help. That's what I will do, and I will work across the aisle with folks from any party, and I will be your advocate in Congress. Thank you very much.
Mr. Levine.
Well, I'd like to start by retouching on the last question a bit on education. It's imperative, okay, and employability is imperative as well. We need to have our students, our young people educated. We need to have them employable. But it brings us all back full circle to my opening statements about economic liberty and about civil liberty. Civil liberty is the liberty to live and to choose what to wear and eat and believe and what to think. But how do we get to our church of choice or our job of choice or our spouse of choice or we have to drive or we have to work or take the train? Money is the logistics of our freedom. Money is the implementation of the ability to be a highly complex society. Money in and of itself is simply a non-specific amplifier. It's a tool. It can be used for deconstruction or construction. And so Congress becomes an issue of allocation of funds, okay? The United States Congress oversees still what is today still the largest treasury and budget in the world, okay? And so what we need is massive and immediate reallocation of funds. The thing that's happening to America isn't that America is gone broke. It's that America's capital, like water or land, has been constrained in the hands of those who would use it in an artificially scarce way to control our political and economic realities. And unless we deal with that inequality, we're not going to get anywhere. I think, so what do we do to overcome money in politics? Both both candidates, regardless of party, we need more disclosure in politics. I think we need a federal bill that would mandate that federal candidates participate in a certain number of public events that would be designed to allow disclosure into their ideological beliefs as well as their personal background and financial holdings and interests. I think that should be mandated at the federal level. It would also encourage private groups to do voluntary events, but I think we need to encourage the fact that our money does not equalize us. Our ideas and our intentions and our ethic does, and in a world of unlimited money, we need to come back again to who we are as people. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to any questions afterwards.
Thank you. Well, thank you, all of you, to all of our candidates for appearing this evening. Also, thank you to our audience. You may... And we are going to take a 10-minute break while we reset for our next set of candidates, which will be the state Senate race. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please make your way back to your seats. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to proceed to our next candidate. This is for State Senate. Unfortunately, Mr. Nielsen is not in attendance this evening. We had hoped he would join us. However, we do have C.J. Jawahar, who is running in addition for the seat. He will have a 2-minute opening statement. And then, once again, he will take questions from the Enterprise Record, from the News and Review, and from the audience. We anticipate probably about 15 minutes. And then we're going to move on to the State Assembly race, which will, after a brief break, we'll reset for that one. So, Mr. Jawahar, if you would like to please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ms. Eleanor. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for having me here today. And I would like to start off thanking Butte County supervisors for banning the fracking in Butte County, because fracking has been very close to my heart for 2 years now. Relentlessly fighting to stop that. Next to Los Angeles, Butte County had the courage to stand up to ban it. And I will be with them in that pursuit, taking that to the next level as your senator. That said, I've been given just 2 minutes. Just want to touch upon a couple of things, why I am running. I'm C.J. Jawahar, as she spelled out. I live in Roseville, from Placer County. I was looking, this is a budget season. A budget has been proposed, $150 billion. 100 billion general funds, 50 billions of special funds. I was really curious to look at the 100 billion. 85 billion in total we spend on education, medication, and correction. Yet, a people of 38 million deserves more. That's why I'm running. We need to find out, while we are spending 40 billion on education, the truancy rate at elementary school is 40%, which means a child who is not at the 3rd grade level will never, ever catch up in his life long. That's how he's falling behind, drops out, and get to the next topic of correction. So we keep spending money on one side, and the other side also we keep spending money on the correction. So that said, I really wanted to find out and speak for you as my constituents. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Gabb, if you'd like to ask the first question.
The state of California has the first surplus that it's had in a while. What would you do with those funds?
Today, California stands 47th in spending for education. We spend about $7,500. That puts us at 40, bottom most. I really want to spend that money to enhance these children to get to the next level from the K-12 to K-14. Today, they spend about $1,000 from their pocket in the community colleges as a tuition, even though we fund that 90%, publicly funded. And that's extremely difficult for these students to cope up with their juggling jobs, continuing the education, and moving on for the next level of education. So that's, and then the universal preschool. I, as a parent, went through that, and I don't want the same set of experience to be done by our forthcoming generation. So that's where my focus would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, Mr. Gascoigne.
Do you support Governor Brown's proposed high-speed rail?
I am a transportation commissioner for City of Roseville. I served as a chair of this commission as well last 2013, all of 2013, I would say. Transportation is a passion because I believe in mass transit. That's where I come from. Yes, to answer that question, it's a job creator. On top of that, if a system can take number of people from point A to point B with a less emission, with a less cost, in a quick manner, that's what we need. In fact, I would advocate to extend that further or beyond Sacramento, all the way to Shasta, to create more opportunity for the tourism. Further even, I would probably have a coalition to talk to Oregon and Washington to take the high-speed rail all the way to the Seattle. That's my position. Thank you.
Following up on Ashley's, Ms. Gibbs' question about the budget surplus, the state also has about a $38 billion debt load. And so what ideas do you have to address the debt load from past budget shortfalls?
Good question. Thank you. Today we are at $350 billion deficit. $200 billion from Calster and a retiree Medicare, and the remaining from the other bonds borrowing. And I am with Governor Jerry Brown on the rainy day fund. That's a way to go. When there is a windfall, let's save, pay back the debt, so we are not passing the billions of debt to our forthcoming generation. That would be my push. Thank you.
Do you believe California's gun policy should be more or less restrictive? What changes would you like to see enacted?
Can you please, the first part of the question I didn't follow.
Do you believe California's gun policies should be more or less restrictive? What changes would you like to see enacted?
Thank you. I come back to the population of California. Anything we do, we are doing for the betterment of the 38 million people. What is true elsewhere is not true for California. So all the regulations that we have, I support. As a senator, I will protect, because I have two-thirds of my district in Northern County, Northern counties with a rural background, with agriculture, where the law, the response for the law enforcement is long. So obviously, people need guns to protect their family, their lives. I am with them. And then I'm a huge, I value actually hugely the local law enforcement and sheriff department. So I would support the policies that have been put forward by the local law enforcement to address the local gun issues beyond the state regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gascoigne.
Back to the governor. Do you support the governor's twin tunnels plan through the Bay Delta?
No. The reason is we need to store water before we deliver water. That's where I've been. I've been also in that fight for 2 years. Nothing personal, but I live in Roseville next to Folsom Dam. At one point, it went to dead pool status. We could not draw water anymore. See, so water rationing was in effect when we are talking about twin tunnels to send water which is not present in the first place. So on top of that 25 billion, no, we have other things to do with that kind of a big money. So anytime I have a chance, I will talk no, and I will convince Governor Brown not to go in that route, because he has created a lot of legacies. I would probably want him to continue the legacy that would take us to the prosperity. Thank you.
This question comes from the audience, and it's addressing medical marijuana. How do you feel about our rights under Prop 215 and 420 patients to have their cannabis medicine and sorry, I'm having trouble reading that one word, and collective growers' rights to grow for patients?
It's a law. I mean, I respect. It's been past 20 years. It's been working. Why mess with that? What we should be talking about is the regulation, because there are always when I talk about the marijuana, we don't want to go back, because we are going forward now. So when we talk forward, how much money it would generate by regulating the marijuana, how much of illegal cultivation we can get rid of, how much impact it would have on the correction, because that is exactly the problem now. You know, we put people behind the bar for having illegal marijuana. So all those things, and I completely concur with candidates who spoke earlier on this topic. We should look at Colorado, Washington, and we should learn our lessons when you're going forward. One step at a time, and what California is heading is the right way. Thank you.
Ashley, one last question for the candidate.
You referenced your opposition to the Twin Tunnels project, but do you support any other changes to the state's water management system?
Like I said, California on any wet year gets about 200 million acre-feet of water. Out of that, we only use 50 million acre water feet. The remaining goes into the ocean. So I always wonder, because I come from the region where there are a lot of conflicts because of the water across the border, country borders, state borders. We are the most advanced country on the planet. So we should have done better in the past. But no worries. Going forward, the first and foremost thing that we should do, I'm the huge proponent of the site reservoir, upstream, offstream, underground, you name it, we want to save the water, to share the water across the state of California. That's where I am, my position is. Thank you.
Tom.
What basically is behind your decision to want to run for office?
Okay, I've been involved in community ever since I came to this country. I had many choices and options in front of me, but I chose to be an advocate. I've been involved in children activities, the community betterment. I serve on the commission. I am part of a justice committee of a Placer People of Faith Together, looking very closely at the jails, county jails, and I'm involved with the Computer Association, going to, so I'm always a people person, and I believe to represent, you should understand the people's need. We should speak for them. That's why, even though I had many other choices, I chose to run office, and I believe I have the qualification. Thank you.
Okay, and the last question from the audience is that the proposal to form a new state from the 16 northern counties of California is gaining traction. it would appear. It will be before our Board of Supervisors at a future meeting. What is your position on this issue?
United we stand, very simple, nothing beyond that. We've been hearing all the talks, dividing California in 6 ways, 16 ways, 60. It's not about that. Anytime you divide, there is going to be a poorest state in this area, and there's going to be a richest state in this area. That would be, the richest one will be the Silicon Valley, and the poorest one will be the Central Valley. As a senator, if I get elected, as a citizen, I don't want those imbalance in the state where I live. So it is, we live together, we share the resources. Just give you an idea. Out of the budget that I mentioned earlier, the northern, the so-called state, the potential state, where will they get the money to sustain, assuming they secede from California? It's not correct, and I would try all my best to stop that, to convince them to get on the board with me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Joe. Excuse me, I think I need some of your water. Mr. Jawahar, you have 2 minutes to make a closing pitch to the audience.
Thank you so much. We have many things to do. I saw some run going on, some fair going on. In spite of that, you chose to be here. Thank you so much for the audience. This is my 3rd candidate forum. My sincere thanks to League of Women Voters. I've been to many of their events. When I was driving up here, I just stopped at a coffee shop to grab a cup of coffee, and I saw this young man, making me coffee. So because he was very young, I just made a conversation. I just asked him, hey, what do you do besides you being a... So he said, I go to college. Oh, okay. So what do you do next? I want to go to my university. Okay, I asked the next question. How do you think you could get there when you're doing this job? How many jobs you do? He said, I juggle 2 jobs in a week. So to put it in a nutshell, he needs $1,000 from his pocket towards his tuition. Okay? And how he makes that? He juggles 2 jobs. He must work for 20 weeks. That is almost a semester. By the time he goes into the class, he's worn out. That is not right. So I told him the purpose of my visit to Chico. I said, if I become the senator, the first thing I will advocate is to make the community college a 0 tuition for the students, because they have better things to do than working 2 jobs. They can make money for the living. But to me, to save this $1,000, if they want to do 2 jobs, they probably want to do 1 job. That's my take. And I want to thank 2 important women in my life, my wife and Butte, my daughter. They go with me. Thank you so much. And my son is over there. He is in Chico State. Here's the deal. Whenever I look at my daughter, I see this. She's going to earn 20% less than what a boy in her class going to earn in 10 years. That pains me. I need to stop with your help. CJ Jawahar for the State Senate District 4. Please vote for me. Elect me to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are going to take a brief 5-minute break, 5 minutes this time, to reset so our state assembly candidates can address you as well and answer your questions.
It's all right. I'm getting used to it. Maybe in November I'll be with a lot of people. Nice to see you. Thank you for this. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if everyone could please take their seats, especially our candidates.
Okay, for our third forum tonight, we have the candidates for the 3rd District for the State Assembly. And tonight we have James Gallagher, Jim Reed, and Ryan Shore. And Eleanor again will explain the rules for this forum. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, we're going to maintain our previous pattern. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to make an opening statement and 1 minute to respond to each question. We will continue to alternate who will be asking each question. So once again, if you have any questions for State Assembly candidates, please write them down and make sure we receive them so that we can try to ask them for you. Our order, once again, is alphabetical. We'll be starting with Mr. Gallagher, and then to Mr. Reed, and then to Mr. Shore. Again, we will be alternating through the questions. So, Mr. Reed, since Mr. Gallagher will be making the first opening statement, Mr. Reed, you will take the first question, and then again, we'll continue rotating through. Okay, Mr. Gallagher, 2 minutes.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters and everyone for coming out here tonight. What a great opportunity for us to get together and have a discussion about the state of our state and our communities here in the North State. It's been a pleasure to be, over the last year now, campaigning across this district, meeting so many great people. My wife Jana is there in the back, and we've been able to take our family along the way to Bidwell Park and some beautiful places across this district. And so I'm so honored to have garnered the support of so many great people and heard so many great ideas as we've gone around. I'm honored to have the support of so many local elected officials here in Butte County, including our Sheriff Jerry Smith, our Supervisor Steve Lambert, Supervisor Doug Teeter, and Supervisor Bill Connolly, as well as our Chico City Councilman Sean Morgan. It's been a pleasure to meet with these folks that are trying to do good things in our community, trying to keep our state together, trying to keep our communities on the right track, and to get their support and to talk to them about how we can do better. The 3 things that I really want to focus on as your next Assemblyman is water, regulatory reform, and keeping our communities safe. On the waterfront, we need more surface water storage in this state. We need to build Sites Reservoir. It's absolutely essential to our future. It also stops the attacks on our water rights. And in order to do that, we need to have constitutional protections for our water rights. Now is an ideal opportunity to do that. I want to be working with our federal folks, our state folks, and our local folks to make it so. We need to reform regulations in this state. It is the hardest place to do business in the nation, and we're seeing it. Toyota just left this state. We've seen businesses continue to leave the state. It is hard on our small businesses. I've been meeting with coffee shop owners. I've been meeting with mom and pop store owners, and they tell me how hard it is just to be able to employ someone, to give somebody a job and an opportunity. We need to change that. And finally, we need to make sure our communities are safe. We need to reform AB 109 and make sure that our law enforcement has the flexibility and resources to keep our kids safe. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Gallagher. I need to remind the candidates to pay attention to the lovely ladies in the front row who have our timing paddles. Again, they will give you a warning, but please do pay attention to that, because if I let you gentlemen go over time, I will get in trouble with them. So let's keep me out of trouble. Mr. Reed.
Yes, thank you. 4 years ago, I decided to run for my first political office. And first I looked at the state of California, and I said, California's legislature is so dysfunctional, I don't think I can really help it. And so I chose to run for federal office. At that time, the House of Representatives and Senate were functioning pretty well. I thought I could really benefit the legislative body in Washington, D.C., and so I decided to run. And you may recall I ran against Wally Herger. Ended up with, it was a learning experience, but I ended up with 43% of the vote, and I thought that was pretty good, and I said, I'm going to try it again next time. And as you know, Wally Herger decided not to run, and I ended up running against Doug LaMalfa. But here we are, now 4 years after my first political race, and things completely changed. Now the U.S. legislature is completely dysfunctional. I don't think I could do any good in Washington, D.C. But guess what? The state of California has come around. The legislative body is passing budgets on time, the government is functioning well, and I think I can do some good. My three big issues, and there's many important issues that I think can contribute, but my three big issues are protecting North State water, and that means keeping Southern California from sucking us dry, but also protecting the quality of our water. Secondly, we need to properly fund education. I have a engineering background, a law degree, and later a master's in taxation. I know how important education is, and for the last 20 years we've been ignoring the funding of education. And finally, we need to do tax reform. And to fund education and do these other things, we need to find a source of money. We're already overtaxed income tax-wise, sales tax-wise. The solution is modifying Proposition 13 so it's only limited to houses, not industry.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Shore.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I know some of you in the room. My name is Ryan Shore. I'm a resident of Chico with my wife Holly, who's here with me tonight. And I'm a sixth-generation California farmer. My family's been here since the 1860s, and I'm the only lifelong farmer in this race. And I've seen firsthand the devastating impacts to farmers, to families, to businesses, and to our communities that Sacramento causes. We have nearly 500 boards, bureaus, and commissions at the last count. And I've seen firsthand what one of them did, and that led me to join this race for the Assembly about a year ago. We had a gentleman come to my farm, sit at the conference table, seeking a job. He said he'd been laid off from his job some months ago because the California Air Resources Board clamped down on the business he was working for. And essentially that business laid him off, changed their operating plan, and went out of business because of those regulations. He came to my farm looking for a job. We agreed to hire him. He said, there's one problem, Ryan. I don't have a driver's license. The county has taken it away because he fell behind in his child support. So I've seen firsthand what happens to our economies when regulations in California run amok. I think we need to work on our water supply system. So I want to go to Sacramento to make sure that Northern California's water rights are protected and that we build infrastructure projects like Sites Reservoir that make economic sense. And the other thing we need to do is make sure that we protect our rural health care and protect our communities through public safety. We've got Obamacare that's going to cost this state dearly. We need to make sure that our hospitals like Inlow can stay functioning. We need to make sure that criminals are locked up. We need to honor those judges' sentences so that we can protect our communities. So I look forward to engaging in the debate with you tonight. I'm a past president of the Butte County Farm Bureau. I intend to stay here. I want to be a statesman about this endeavor. Go to Sacramento, serve, live here, work here, and then come home. So if there's ever a question, feel free to call me on my cell phone at 570-RYAN. I want to make that easy. That goes right to my cell phone. So again, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I look forward to the discussion and the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. I don't think we've ever had a candidate give out a cell phone number. That's a new one. Ms. Gabb, the first question.
All three candidates brought up the issue of the state's water supply. Can you be more detailed on how you would go about enacting the changes that you would like to see?
I think I'm first, and let me start by saying the governor's tunnel plan is ridiculous, and we must discard it. We did a $150 million study on how much water can be taken out of the Sacramento River, and once we figured it out, they designed the tunnels with pumps that can pump more than that amount of water out of the delta. And so it's just a matter of time that Southern California, who will be paying the bill for this construction, will force us to take more water out of the delta, destroying the environment. So that's the problem. Now, what can we do? And I support the Sites Reservoir. We need more storage. We need to strengthen our levees. We need to improve the quality of the delta. These are all big projects that are part of the plan now, but that was part of the plan to induce us to go along with the tunnels. And the tunnels are so bad that we can't be induced by that.
Thank you, Mr. Shore.
Thank you. You know, I serve on the Butte County Water Commission. I farm in several water districts here locally. I'm intimately familiar with that. Number one, I'm a big proponent of Sites Reservoir. As anticipated, it's going to cost about $3.5 billion in today's dollars and generate 1.2 million acre-feet of water. About 800,000 in the project itself and another 400,000 acre-feet of additional flexibility between reoperating Oroville and Shasta dams. So that, again, we generate 1.2 million acre-feet. So I'm a big believer in that. I think that's a great investment for Northern California because it reduces reduces demand on our groundwater supply, which we all know is something we need to make sure is sustainable. The other thing I want to oppose in Sacramento, the governor's tunnel plan, because I think those would be the two giant straws that suck water out of Northern California. Given that, we'll still have to protect the delta if the tunnels go through. We've got the water going through the delta. That has to be there to keep the salinity at bay and to protect the environment. So if there's water going out the tunnels, that's more demand on Northern California's water. So we need to look at this holistically, and as a candidate who farms in this race and knows about that resource, I want to protect it and make sure it's here for all of us for future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Mr. Gallagher.
We really have a critical opportunity right now at this juncture in our state. You know, with this drought that has come, certainly it's been very much of a pinch on all of us, especially in agriculture up in the North State, but throughout this state. And we need to have a conversation right now about how we can move forward and make sure that our water infrastructure is going to be one that can take us into the next century here in this state. We haven't built a substantial water project since this state was about 17 million people. Now we're at 38 million. So there's some great opportunities right here, and what I would do is I would continue the work of what our Assemblyman Dan Logue has done. He pushed a bond that would have been just for building more storage in the state, Sites Reservoir and Temperance Flat. And he saw an opportunity in the legislature to move it forward. A Democrat now is moving forward that same legislation that has storage opportunities in it and continuous appropriation. That's important to make sure that the money is going to be there to build this storage project. And also area of origin rights protections. That's what we need absolutely in the North State to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Gascoigne?
This is kind of a repeat of an earlier question from the earlier forum. But what is your stand on legalizing recreational marijuana, as has been done in Colorado and Washington?
I think I'm first up on that. Yeah. So I've spoken out on this issue on a number of occasions. I'm opposed to further loosening of those restrictions. Of course, the voters have spoken with some of the earlier propositions, but I think that we've seen in the foothills the tremendous problem that business has caused here in Northern California, and specifically some of the environmental degradation, some of the water quality concerns are important. So, and I think we need to give our law enforcement officers the tools to deal with that appropriately. I've said before, we need to be able to have our law enforcement officers use Roundup when they find an illegal grow to easily and effectively deal with that solution. And so that's one of the tools I think we need to do is make sure that our law enforcement officials can deal with that appropriately, because it's a huge travesty on our community. It costs all of us a tremendous amount of money dealing with that issue. So I'm opposed to further loosening of those rules and regulations. And I think, obviously, last I knew, it's illegal federally, and so I think we need to maintain the rule of law and order in this state.
Thank you, Mr. Shore.
Thank you very much.
Red flag. Mr. Gallagher.
I oppose legalizing for recreational use, and I think that the voters were really sold a bill of goods when 215 was passed, because what they were told was that this was going to be for people with debilitating diseases, people with serious illnesses, to help them with pain. And it's obvious to anybody who's seen this in their communities that that's not what's going on. It's widespread. It's being used for profit. We're seeing for profit grows. We're seeing the criminalization element here. We're seeing, cartels that are involved in this and are moving this across state lines, polluting our water, taking apart our land sides. We're seeing it across, Butte County right now, and, I'm seeing it down in Sutter County as grows are coming up near schools, and our kids are being affected. And I think the other thing that, people need to really get right is that this is not just something that's no big deal. And there was a study that just came out last week that talked about the effects of marijuana on the brain. The last thing we need is to be, making something get out there that is going to, devastate the future of our economy, our young people.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Reed.
Well, my position on this has evolved over the last couple years. I believe that the time has come to legalize marijuana. Part of the reason my position has evolved is some of the things these other gentlemen have mentioned. There's these illegal groves that law enforcement seems not to be able to keep under control, and it's doing terrible environmental damage. It's sucking water away that we need during the drought. They're using rat poison that gets into our water supply. They're ruining our forests. And so we need to regulate this, and the easiest way, and I believe we simply need to follow the Colorado plan, the best way to regulate this is to make it legal. And guess what? Colorado is reporting $10 million a week in taxation revenue as a result of marijuana being legalized.
Thank you. A question from the audience, and this actually also came from an earlier forum, but it's worth repeating here because California has had several changes in gun laws and gun regulations in the past year. And so what are your views on gun control, gun registration, increasing background checks, and the Second Amendment? Yeah, we'll be starting with Mr. Gallagher.
I think we've gone way too far in this state with the gun control legislation that we've come through, that has come through. Just starting this year with the ban on lead ammunition. First of all, it's going to raise the cost for hunters and people who, recreate and buy lead ammunition throughout this state. You know what it also does? There's actually a revenue tax on those bullets that goes towards California Fish and Game and helping create more recreational hunting activities throughout this state. So it's bad policy. And you know what the net effect of these are is that the criminals have guns, and those of us who are law-abiding people who are entitled to our Second Amendment rights, we're hamstrung while the criminals are able to have whatever they want. And it is absolutely important that we protect our Second Amendment rights. It is an essential part of our liberty in this country, in our state, in our communities, and we should not overreact when things happen. We need to make sure that our liberties are protected, and we also need to make sure that our law enforcement people can keep us protected from dangerous criminals.
I believe gun ownership is an important right that we need to protect. On the other hand, I think it's important that we keep guns out of the hands of violent criminals and people who have mental problems that can do terrible damage. Actually, I believe California has been the leader on these gun regulations that we're talking about, gun registration, even eliminating lead and ammunition. These are good things. These are things that really the rest of the nation should follow California's example. But I believe at this stage we're right about where we should be.
I think there's been a lot of emotion in this debate, but I'm a big believer in protecting our liberty and protecting our freedom that's guaranteed by the Second Amendment. And the Supreme Court's affirmed that on a number of occasions. So with that being said, I'd like to see California's concealed weapons permit be reciprocal to other states, so that if you come here from another state, that we do offer that opportunity to reciprocate to that person that's in this state from another state with the concealed weapons permit. Some of these things like the lead ammunition ban, I think, are emotional and not based in science. I think we need to base those decisions on science. And again, I think if we take away bullets, that's kind of the backdoor approach to taking away our Second Amendment right, and I don't think we ought to be doing that. that in Sacramento. And of course, it's a federal issue as well, being protected by the Second Amendment. But in California, I want to work to protect that. We use guns here not only for hunting, but as tools in livestock and cropping operations, as well as a means for defense. And I don't think that anybody here in the North State really wants to change that. So I'm a big believer in maintaining those rights and freedoms under the Second Amendment. Look to expand those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gabb.
Unfunded liabilities seem to be a growing problem at all levels of government. What would you do to address that for the state of California?
Mr. Reed, you're up.
Okay, so you're right. First of all, we have this large debt, and then we have this unfunded liability on top of it, which it's hard to tell where one ends and the other starts, but it's a big problem we need to deal with. And that's why I believe now we need to find another source of revenue to start paying that debt and those unfunded liabilities down. Again, my solution is to modify Prop 13. Prop 13 was intended to protect home ownership so that when you retire, your property taxes don't increase to the point where you can't afford to live in your own home. But that doesn't make sense when it's applied to industrial property like oil refineries, big commercial properties. And if we change proposition so it doesn't apply to those types of properties, it will generate a lot of revenue that we can use to start paying down these unfunded liabilities.
Mr. Shore.
Number one, I think one of the big things is when we vote on a bond, or you see it on a ballot and it says that the bond might cost $12 billion, or in the case of the bullet train, $68 billion potentially. So oftentimes people forget about the interest that's paid on that bond, which in today's environment is about double. So if you have a $30 billion bond, that's about $30 billion in interest for a total cost of $70 billion, which I would want to do in Sacramento is make sure that when those go on the ballot, that we put some information in respect to the cost of that interest for financing those projects. The other thing I think we need to do is really let innovators, let businesses thrive in this state. We've seen it when President Kennedy, President Reagan reduced taxes. Businesses, innovation, jobs, and opportunities took off. And that's really what we need to do in this state. Make this state open for business. We have a 24% poverty rate by some estimations. 24% of the people living below the poverty line in this state. That's unacceptable. We need to do better. We have the tools, the talent, and the resources here. We have great universities, great minds, and people that want to come here from all over the world. Unleash that,
Thank you.
and business will fill those coffers.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher.
Well, there are two really big unfunded liabilities that we're facing in the state. One is through pensions and public pensions in the state. The other is in retiree health care. And we need to tackle both of those issues. You know, Stanford University did a study and they showed that the pension liability in this state is about $500 billion right now. We need to do something to address this. And let me tell you, the issue here is the more money that we're having to put into these pension plans means that's less money for services, vital services here at the local level, at the state level, whether it's education, whatever it is that you want. And I'm the only candidate who has actually tackled this issue. I tackled it at the local level. Previous board had passed a very generous pension package, and we saw that that was not going to be sustainable. We sat down and we showed this to our employees, said this is not going to be sustainable for in the long term. That's not good for taxpayers. It's not good for you as public employees. And so we made those changes, and we've saved $48 million on our pension costs in Sutter County. We need to do the same thing at the state. We need to tackle this issue now.
Mr. Gascoigne.
Is this for Mr.? Yeah, okay.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Right. AB 109, the prison realignment in the state, is it working? And if not, what are the options to meet the demand by the courts to transfer these prisoners?
AB 109, I don't think it is working. And the statistics may be open to discussion and debate, but we've seen it here locally with our jail here in Butte County overcrowding as it is, because the state realignment has shifted prisoners from the state to our county jails, and so low-level offenders are now, in some cases, out on the streets when they really shouldn't be. I think we need to honor judges' sentences. If they've sentenced them to state prison or the county jail, whatever it might be, we need to honor that commitment to our judicial system. So we can do that in a number of ways. Part of that might be investing in new incarceration facilities, and maybe it's working with with private firms that built the facility, and our state runs those firms so that we can, again, honor those judges' commitments, because we can't have criminals running loose on the street. That drives business away. That drives families away. And we've seen it here in Chico. So I think we need to also give our local law enforcement the tools and flexibility needed to deal with that, so they can make the decisions, not Sacramento, because they have the best approach here. And there's some programs like maybe
Thank
mental
you,
health
Mr.
and some of
Shore.
those things we can work on
Red
as well
flag.
through that. Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher.
I think the answer to that is in some ways it is working, but in a very big way it's not working. And let me talk first about some of the ways that it is working, and we're seeing it right here locally. Corey Honey, who's going to be your next sheriff here in Butte County, has had a great program where he's getting some of the truly low-level offenders, those who really can be rehabilitated. He's putting them to work. He's putting them to work doing community projects, and he's getting them into programs that can help get them back on the right track and become productive members of society. That's where I see that there are things that are working at the local level and that we can continue to work on. But where it's not working very fundamental level is that we're seeing some very serious people coming into our county jails. There was an article just here recently in the Chico ER about some of the problems that we're seeing with the gang mentality, more sophisticated criminals in our jails. There's drugs finding their way in there. There's some people with some pretty serious mental health issues that we're having to bear the cost of. And the bottom line is our county jails are just not fit to do that. We need to have more secure facilities for those folks, either state prison or private facilities.
I think it's atrocious that we're spending more money on our prisons than we are on our schools. There's something wrong here, and it needed to be fixed, and the federal court forced us to fix it. The federal court is what forced us to pass this law, and it is working. Rehabilitation should really be the focus of our criminal justice system. And that usually means education and training as well as actual job experience. That can't be done in a state prison, but it can be done on a local level, and that's why this law is working. It's working unevenly because some counties are doing it better than others, but we need to simply follow the counties that are doing a good job, and this will be a successful program.
Thank you. I have one from the audience, and this has to do with education. So how do each one of you propose to improve K-12 education, particularly considering the achievement gap between disadvantaged and minority students with students from better funded districts, and also do you support a Common Core standards? And we'll start with Mr. Gallagher.
A very big thing that I think we need to do, and it's not just about money. I heard somebody talk earlier about, well, hey, we're 46 or something in terms of per pupil funding. It's not just about the amount of money, it's about the quality of the money and where it's going, and is it getting to our students, and are we making productive members of society? Because that's really the goal of education. It's not necessarily to send someone to college and make sure that we get the A through G requirements. It's to make sure that these kids, that they come up and they're able to be productive and part of our community and adding to our community. And so that's the thing that we really need to do, and part of that is getting it back to the local level. So much of the money is spent at the state level and the state bureaucracy. Who knows better how to raise our kids and how to make sure that our kids are educated than parents, teachers at the local levels, local school boards. Both of my parents were on school boards, and they were always so frustrated that they were hamstrung by the state. The money got down there, they had to spend it a certain way. We need to have more flexibility at the local level, and that will help us in terms of making kids more productive, better members of society.
Thank you.
We've lost track of the fact that education is an investment in the future. The better educated get better jobs, make more money, and end up paying more taxes. We get that money back. Now, since the recession in 2008, the California education budget has been slashed by more than 25%. A little bit of that came back this year, but we cannot afford to ignore these costs. We need to restore that education budget now. Now, We do have a new formula for funding education, and it goes to the very issue that the question raises, that our disadvantaged children aren't getting as good of education as the more wealthy school districts. This new funding plan solves that problem. Let me just end with Common Core real fast. I absolutely believe in Common Core. On an average, students move from one place to another every 5 years. If we don't have something like Common Core, they may be learning the same thing over and over again.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
I'm a big believer in vocational education. I was a state FFA officer, dedicated a year of my life to touring this state, visiting with colleges and high school students and the businesses and families that support them. And what I saw most during that year that I did that was that local control is important, so that parents and families can have the opportunity to send their child to the school of their choice, where the type of education they desire for those students is offered. So I'm also a believer in charter schools. Having toured charter schools here in Northern California, I think that's a great opportunity where parents and the community can have an impact on the quality of education offered. And ultimately, not everybody will go to college, so we need to make sure that students coming out of these programs are ready and able. We have people that come to our business that have trouble filling out the employment forms, and I think that ought to be something that we work on, is that those students are prepared for a job when they exit high school. And in terms of Common Core, there's some serious issues with it, and I understand it's being implemented to varying degrees, but I think that ought to be left up to the local control, because federal mandates I'm not in favor of. So again, more local control and more opportunities in our education
Thank you,
system.
Mr. Shore. I'm sorry, I was just, okay. Next question is to Ashley. Well, no, being asked by.
You can ask me questions. I asked this question in one of the previous forums. California has the first surplus that it's had in a while. What would you propose to do with those funds, and how would you work to ensure they are used wisely?
Well, I think Governor Brown's plan is correct. You got to use those surplus funds to pay down the debt, or at least make it a rainy day fund for the future. When we go through a recession like we recently went through, more spending is the only way you get out of a mess like that. But when you get out of the mess and you have surplus funds, you got to prepare for the next economic crisis. And so putting away money to provide for that when it happens is critical.
I'd like to see the state pay down its debt. It certainly won't do all of it, but I think we owe that to ourselves and to future generations to pay down that debt. There's some real issues with structural debt at county levels as well as the state. Sutter County, for example, has a $126 million pension liability to CalPERS alone. So we need to make sure that the state pays down those obligations. So beyond that, I think we need to work to put more money back in the hands of people. Reduce the tax burden, reduce the regulation burden. And I've always said that if it's a good idea to shop local and support our local businesses downtown, support our local farmers markets and so forth, then it can't be a good idea to take money out of our communities and send it to Sacramento or to Washington, because I think oftentimes it gets squandered. So if it's a good idea to invest here locally, let's keep more of that money here locally. Let's leave it in your pockets to grow opportunities, to grow jobs, and to grow our community here. So pay down the debt in Sacramento and leave more of our taxes in our pockets here locally to do good work here. That's my solution. Thank you.
Yeah, to say that we have a surplus in this state is really deceptive, okay? Because the amount of debt that we have in this state, I just talked to you earlier about the $500 billion pension liability that we have in this state alone. We've done a lot of bonds over the years, and so we have a lot of, so every $2 that we're spending on infrastructure, $1 is going to interest. We have to pay down debt, and we have to tackle entitlement reform in this state. And then we can really get to a place where we might have a real surplus. We also need to reduce regulations and reduce the tax burden on business in this state. Whether it was President Kennedy that did it or President Reagan, when they reduced the regulations and the tax burden, what did we see? Revenue soared, we had more revenue, we had more money to provide for education, to provide for infrastructure. And we need to get back in this state to really not trying to be all things to all people. That's our problem. We're overspending. We need to do the priority things in this state. What does the state need to do well?
education, infrastructure, public safety. That's what we pay taxes for. Let's get those things right and then focus on
Mr. Gallagher,
things.
thank you. Mr. Gascoigne.
This is also a question that was asked earlier, even though it's not practiced here in Butte County, I'd like to know your take on fracking.
I think that's my question. Thank you for that question, Tom. You know, I serve on the Water Commission here where I voted no on the proposal that would have banned fracking. And I think that in California, we need to make sure that we don't seal ourselves off from the production of energy. I think there are safe, effective methods and companies that can implement those. I've said it before, California is a state of innovators. We have the best minds, the best universities. I think we can use them to do that safely while still protecting our groundwater. We can produce energy, put people to work. So I am a proponent of making sure that we use energy wisely and safely, and let's safeguard that through technology and innovation. I know it's being done in Northern California safely where it hasn't impacted groundwater. I heard it here tonight. So I think we can do it. I don't think we need to put a blanket limitation on anything. I think that is a disservice to folks. We've already seen it with cap and trade talking about a 70 cents a gallon increase coming January 1st for the price of diesel fuel and gasoline. That will hit all of our pocketbooks, and I think that needs to change.
I think we need to be careful to make sure that emotionalism doesn't drive this debate. You know, I think we're seeing a lot from Hollywood. We're seeing documentaries. You know, I just watched the movie the other night, Promised Land, you know, that really, you know, emotionalizes this issue and it makes people think that, oh, fracking is bad, it's poisoning water everywhere. We need to look at the real science and understand what's really going on with fracking. And that's what we really need to do. Let's not get driven by emotionalism. The other fact here is that, you know, we're not going to see a lot of fracking up here in Northern California. What the proposal to do fracking is really dealing with Monterey Shale, which is more in the Central Valley. We do need to make sure that, you know, our water is protected. Obviously, we want to make sure we look out for our water resources. That's vital. You know, there's issues about seismic. But let's not just ban fracking. That would be a bad idea. Actually, fracking has the opportunity to bring a lot of economic opportunity and jobs. And so we need to look at that. We need to take a balanced approach to looking at fracking, not just have an emotional response of banning it.
Well, let me first compliment the Butte County Board of Supervisors for passing the restriction on no fracking here in Butte County. I think it was a courageous act on their part, and I absolutely support it. Water is our most important natural resource here in the North State, and fracking puts that at risk. And fracking can actually cause that water to be ruined for many, many generations. Now, I have an engineering background. I believe there's a way that you can do procedures and equipment that are generally safe for fracking that won't jeopardize your water. However, there is always human error. That's the one thing you can always count on. There will be human error at some point in time, and fracking with these chemicals are so bad that with that human error, we can ruin our water supply in the North State beyond foreseeable generations.
Thank you. This question is actually two different questions, and it comes from the audience. The audience member would like to know which political party are each one of you associated with? That's the first question. The second question actually has to do with the $150 annual fee applied to property owners in rural areas for use by CAL FIRE for fire prevention measures. Do you support the $150 annual SRA fee being applied to private property for use by CAL FIRE?
I'm a Republican, and I oppose what I think is an unconstitutional fire tax that's been imposed on us in rural areas. When we look at this, you know, this is not going to, it will not increase fire suppression activities. It does not give us any additional fire suppression infrastructure in the North State. What this is really about is, and it goes back to our budget, and bad policy, bad fiscal policy, is that we keep running out of money because we don't control our spending,
And what ended up happening is departments are underfunded. They don't have the money to fund their department, so they find these, instead of calling it a tax, they call it a fee. And they charge users this fee in order to pay for the underlying department. That's unconstitutional. It's not consistent with state law. And Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, which has endorsed my candidacy, is now challenging that in court. I support that lawsuit. I think ultimately it will be found to be an unconstitutional fee, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that that practice stops in this state.
I'm a Democrat, but and I hope everybody's had a chance to look at my brochure because I discussed this, but also take a look at the website jimreed2014.com. The two fees that I believe need to be eliminated are the fire protection fee that you asked about, but there's a second one that's even worse, and that is the school bus fee. There are a lot of students in this rural area that their only way to get to school is by the school bus, but yet they have to pay a fee, or their parents have to pay a fee in order to get to school. It's absolutely wrong, because many of these students who probably need, because of their background, need the education more than, let's say, people who are close to schools, are forced to pay this fee, and it encourages them not to go to school. Now, this brings us back, though, to the change I propose in Proposition 13, because when you eliminate these fees, you eliminate revenue that we absolutely need. And so we need to find a source to replace those, the elimination of those fees, applying or eliminating Prop 13 as to industrial properties.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Shore.
Thank you. I, too, am a Republican, and I also am in complete agreement that the fire tax fee should be eliminated. I believe it is a tax. We have this bad history in California of just changing the name of it, and I don't think it does any good when it just gets siphoned off to the general fund in some cases, like these fees do. So I, too, support the lawsuit that would seek to stop the fire fee and refund that money back to landowners. We see oftentimes in California in particular, the state purchasing land, taking it off private property, off the tax rolls, but yet CAL FIRE is responsible for fighting fires on that land. So we've increased their burden, and now we seek to penalize private individuals for paying, in many cases, for that burden. And I think that's a mistake to do that. California has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. And I think we need to make sure that those types of things are taken care of and stopped.
Thank you.
So I oppose the fire tax fee. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question from Ms. Gebb, and then one last question from Mr. Gascoigne, and then we're going to go to closing statements.
What distinguishes you as a candidate from your opponents, and how will that make you an effective leader in our state?
Well, first of all, I believe the key issues that everybody are concerned about, my position is much different than either of my opponents. For instance, a woman's right to choose. I absolutely believe that it's a constitutional right that must be maintained. As I understand it, my opponents both would outlaw abortions under any circumstances. When it comes to marriage, gay marriage, I absolutely believe that the equal protection of the clause protects everybody. As I understand it, my opponents would eliminate the ability for gays to marry. Finally, I recognize that we have global warming and that we need to do something about it now. We need to protect future generations. As I understand it, my opponents either deny that it exists or deny that it's human caused.
You know, I think she was still holding up the stop sign. I apologize. I think one of the biggest things that distinguishes me from my opponents is my thought that we need to push back against bureaucrats. And I'll illustrate. Nearly a year ago, CARB officials came to this very chamber, the California Air Resources Board. They had the room filled with farmers and business owners and community-minded people. I was the only opponent that spoke out against that. Mr. Short? At this.
I promise we'll reset your time. The issue is that the television feed cannot pick up your voice unless you're in front of a microphone.
Okay. All right, we'll get closer to a microphone then. So I think that's one of the things that I want to distinguish. And that's how I'm a little different than that, like it used to be. I think if we want to change the dynamic in Sacramento, we have to change the type of people we send. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Mr. Gallagher.
You know, I think what distinguishes me is experience and getting the job done. I think we've talked here tonight, and a lot of us, I think we know what the issues are in this state. We know that we're overregulated. We know that we're overtaxed. We know that, you know, our communities are less safe because of AB 109 realignment. And we know that we need to do something about water in this state. And we're struggling. We need someone who can go down there and be effective. We know what the problems are, but you need someone who can be effective. I have that experience. You know, growing up in farming, I understand agriculture. I understand water, that is its lifeblood. I also have a legal background. I'm an agricultural law attorney. And that has helped me be an advocate for many of us in this area and be able to go and fight those battles, because I understand how the law works and how we can beat the regulators and how we can do that. I have experience fighting at the local level as a county supervisor, and I've worked with our county sheriffs to try and fight back against this AB 109 realignment. That's why 5 out of the 6 county sheriffs have endorsed my candidacy, because they know I have the ability to get the job done. I've ushered through big projects. I can make Sites Reservoir happen. I'm ready to do the job, and I'll be happy to have your support.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Red flag. Mr. Gascoigne.
What is your stand, and this is for you, Ryan, Mr. Shore, on endangered species, threatened wildlife, such as the Delta smelt, or even wolves like OR7, who paid us a visit last year and then promptly went back? Should government be involved in that, protecting wild endangered species?
First of all, I think into an emotional issue to stop development, to stop affordable housing, to stop farming, and to stop the activities that make this golden state great. So I would work to make sure we can bring some reforms about to CEQA.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Red flag.
Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher.
We absolutely need to reform the Endangered Species Act at the federal level, also at the state level. It gets in the way of a lot of projects in this state. It causes those projects to become a lot more expensive. And, you know, I myself have dealt with this at the local level, because we've had to fight back many times trying to get projects done, bridges done, trying to get a levee project done here in Sutter and Butte counties, where we've had to fight against the Endangered Species Act. And we actually had environmental groups who wanted to sue us under CEQA to try and stop the levee repairs in their tracks. Well, we stood down those groups. And as a candidate, I'm going to continue to stand down those things. I'm going to work for reform. Our board was on the record saying that the elderberry beetle should be delisted. They've already made that determination in the federal bureaucracy, but they haven't gotten around to actually delisting it. So there's a mandate on us to continue to have to mitigate on our projects for these things. It should not be, and we need to continue to fight that so that we can get vital projects done in this state. We need water infrastructure, we need levee infrastructure, we need road infrastructure.
Actually, the state of California has done a lousy job on protecting our endangered species. Earlier tonight, when the congressional candidates forum, there was a question about the federal and state regulation of the Sacramento River. And quite frankly, the only reason the environment in the Sacramento River and the Delta is being protected is because of the federal Endangered Species Act. If it was left up to the state, those species would not be here today. So we need to strengthen our state laws with respect to endangered species, and we need to enforce them.
Thank you. Gentlemen, each one of you has 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Again, we're going in alphabetical order, so Mr. Gallagher, you're first.
Well, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you and have and be able to have this discussion. Once again, it's been an honor to come out and let you know what I'm about, but also to learn about what you guys are about. And I've gone through so many communities, whether it's Paradise, Chico, Red Bluff, all the way down to Pleasant Grove. So I've gone throughout this district. And again, we know what the problems are in this state. We know that we're an overregulated, tax-burdened state. We need to get back to a place where we can have economic liberty again, where businesses can thrive. And that means our small mom and pops here locally, who are struggling right now. I talked to a guy that owns a coffee shop at Marysville, and he said this minimum wage increase is going to have the effect of doubling his rent. And what is that going to result in? Well, he's going to be able to keep his core people, but some of his entry-level people, he's going to have to let go. And there's not going to be more entry-level jobs that help people move up the ladder. That's not good for our state. We need to do something about that. And again, I believe that I have the experience and the background to get that done on the regulatory front. We need to invest in our water infrastructure. We need to make sure that Sites Reservoir gets built. As I said, I've been part of this levee project in Sutter and Butte counties. When we first started, they said, you'll never do it. You're too far behind. You don't have the funding, you don't have the resources, you're not going to make it happen. In 5 years, we put that project through. It's on schedule, on budget, it's getting done right now. Like I said, my next project is Sites Reservoir, and together, working together, local, state, federal, we can make it happen. Finally, we need to keep our communities safe, as I said. I want to work with our local law enforcement. I want to find out what they're doing, because again, at the local level, we understand what's going on. Teachers understand what's going on with our kids. Our local law enforcement knows what's going on here in the local community. They know what we need to do with these individuals. We need to respect that, give them the flexibility to send dangerous criminals back to state prison or private facilities, and we need to give them the resources to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
My two opponents keep talking about how overtaxed and overregulated California is, and it must be going to hell in a handbasket. Well, I think that's ignoring the reality of the situation. California is doing quite well, thank you. We have a balanced budget. It's got, if it was a country all by itself, it would have the 8th largest economy in the world. The Silicon Valley and San Francisco have the best economy in the entire country right now. Now, of course, the problem is it's not uniform across the state. And we do need to bring that prosperity that's going on in the Bay Area to places like Chico. And I believe because Chico has a great college here generating wonderful engineers who will fit right in with the high-tech industries of the Bay Area, there's a way that we can encourage those companies to move some of their facilities in this direction. I want to go back and finish by talking about Prop 13 a little bit more to explain how this works. When a person or a company buys a property, the purchase price is the tax basis. And if they make improvements to that property, the cost of those improvements are added on top of the original purchase price for determining the tax. Well, the trouble with that is the cost of those improvements in these big industrial facilities is much different than value. If Prop 13 was taxed based on value rather than cost, it would encourage these companies to make infrastructure improvements. most of the time on these big projects, the value added to the property is less than half of the actual cost. That's why these companies aren't investing in infrastructure. They're going to be taxed on it. If we tax on value as to industrial properties, it will encourage them to make infrastructure improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Shore.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. I don't want to make a career of politics. Just this afternoon, I was in a tractor. I think these keys to that tractor are like your keys. Keys that, as an assemblyman, that can help you unlock doors in Sacramento to those agencies that stifle growth and innovation, that stifle your family. I look forward to making sure that we have an open door.
Thank you.
In Sacramento. I appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Thank you, Mr. Shore. Thank you, Mr. Reed, Mr. Gallagher. We really appreciate your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you as well. Our next candidate forum will be next week. We have the 2 boards of supervisor races, plus a judicial race and treasurer tax collector, and that'll be on Wednesday, May 14th.